Be bold. Be heard. Welcome to Unmute Your Mic with your host, Jessica Bell. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Unmute Your Mic.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unmute Your Mic. My name is Jessica Bell. I am your host from Kansas City, Missouri. And today I have Michaela with me. She is from Louisiana. Well, she's currently in Louisiana. And I'm so excited to talk to her, to hear her story. Michaela, I want to thank you for agreeing to be on my podcast today. So if you could just share a little bit about yourself and let us know a little about you.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here in Kansas City, Missouri. It's been a long time, but I was there in 98 for, it's interesting that this would happen during March Madness because in 98, it was in March. I think it was in your town, and we went there for it. So anyway, long time ago. I'm an author. Currently have seven books published. I'm working on my 8th. I'm a mom, and I've lived an interesting journey that I like to call 38 Triple D. No, that is not my undergarment size. It has nothing to do with my physical appearance or characteristics. Maybe when I was pregnant, maybe. I don't know. I didn't measure. But it's a way of describing my journey, what I call 38 Triple D, learning how to thrive in all things in life, no matter what's thrown my way, and to go from much tribulation. And the 38 Triple D stands for lifelong disability of legal blindness, divorce at 26, and death and loss of my beloved husband at 38, and being thrown into solo motherhood. And that was almost 4 years ago. So, as you can see, it's been an interesting ride.
That's definitely interesting. And okay, so you just said so much, and I'm like, where do I start? But
Start wherever you want.
I love that you even, like you said, created a name for it as just like a way of kind of being able to talk about the things that you've gone through. And so if we could talk, well, I guess we'll just start with the first D and about the lifelong disability. Can you share a little bit about your experience with that? What has it been literally since birth, or can you just go a little bit into that?
No, it was totally since birth. I've never taken a breath or lived a day, or nor will I, without being legally blind. And actually, I don't know your background or your audience's background, but my background is a woman of faith, of Christianity, and the way I was brought up. Okay, you never know what what each audience is. Excuse me. Anyway, so in my family, we believe that even though I was born totally and completely blind in total darkness at birth, that at 7 months old, the Lord decided to grant me my sight and do a miracle to at least allow me to see instead of being in total darkness. So I do see, and I have for the remaining of my life, and I'm going to be 43 in November, except for those first 7 months, but it is impaired. It's legally blind or visually impaired. There was no family history. There was no medical explanation. You know how science is. Science goes so far, and then comes God. But anyway, they don't want to admit it sometimes, but whatever. So I've done it my whole life. I've done the whole thing where I used to wear glasses. I've had 4 eye operations. It didn't fix it. It was cosmetic. Let me back up for a second. I didn't think to explain it. It's called optic nerve atrophy, which what that means is, and I'm not the medical jargon person, so if you want that, you're talking to the wrong girl. If there is any medical people in your audience, they'll probably be laughing at the way I describe this. But for anyone who's a layperson like me, if you've ever been in like an eye doctor's office or like an anatomy and physiology class and maybe biology or something, and you saw a picture of the optic nerve in your textbook or in your eye doctor's office, you'll remember or may have noticed that the optic nerve is a certain shape and size, or not size, color, and mine is totally jacked up. It's It is whacked out like no one's business. It is not the normal color. It is not the normal size and shape. So what that means is if it was normal, the bloodstream would be able to go through it like it's supposed to, but mine does not. So because the bloodstream doesn't flow the way it's supposed to, the way it was explained to me, that means the images or the things that you would process through the optic nerve to tell your brain what you're seeing, mine is very not processing correctly, and it's a lot slower. And then let's complicate the issue. Okay, I'm not done. Let's add nystagmatism, nearsightedness, crappy peripheral, and crappy depth perception. So it's very complicated. But yeah, so that's what
Yeah,
I've dealt with.
that's complicated for sure.
Yeah, the main issue is I don't drive, and it takes me a lot longer to do things. So imagine, I was the girl always in the front row of the class. I always had, accommodations. I had different technologies depending on what was going on at what age we're talking about. I had longer time for tests and homework assignments. In college, I had readers and scribes. I've done everything on audiobooks since 5th grade, on and on and on. And the ACT took me like 10 to 12 hours to take instead of the 4 that it's supposed to take. Yeah, I only took it twice. I said, I'm done with you. I hate that thing. I'm not doing this again. I had enough to get into the college I wanted, so I was good. But so yeah,
And
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
No. So
I
it's just
saying, I can only imagine how difficult that had to be, especially being younger. Like you said, if it almost forces you to just be different immediately when you come into the world.
yeah,
And
definitely.
children are not the nicest when you're younger.
No, they're not.
And
I had my
I know
share
that
of
can make it
bullies.
hard, but I love how even as you're sharing this part of your story, that you're kind of sharing it from like you being on the other side of it. And so though it's something you're still dealing with
Oh
as
yeah,
an adult and with years of kind of having to learn to navigate around it, you're still able to be functioning.
right. I
Um,
mean, it's just it came with a lot of practice. I mean, I've been doing it for almost 43 years, so I, had a lot of time to figure it out. So, or
and
most of it.
what did your faith play in that? Like as you were growing up, were you always a believer, or is that something that started later on in your life?
Well, I became a believer at 5, so I mean, most of us don't remember much of our life before 5, anyway. So, I can pretty much, I guess you would say, most of what I remember, I've always known under the knowledge or position of being a Christian. So I don't really remember what my life was like before it because I was younger than 5. But yeah, it definitely has played a role in it, and it kind of because of the point of origin of when I came into this world, as far as the story of me being born blind and my disability, it kind of was like I'm trying to think of the word I want to use, kind of like I don't want to say introduction, but set the stage per se. And like that was very much a part of the first paragraphs of my story, kind of embedded. Not saying that would have been a given that I would have chosen it, but it kind of laid the foundation. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense.
No, that makes complete sense. And like I always say, everything that we go through or have gone through in our life, it places us, like it's the reason why we are who we are today. Whether it's
Exactly.
things that we look back on and we're like, man, I really wish I wouldn't have had to experience this. But everything literally is like a puzzle piece as to who we are. And
Exactly.
so that once I want to lead that just to the second D that you said. So you said you experienced divorce, and I also have gone through a divorce. So I'm really interested to hear just your perspective on what happened as far as your divorce, but then what kind of outlook you had coming out on the other side of it.
Well, I mean, mine was actually kind of interesting. I mean, they're exes for a reason, right? um, I don't want. I don't. I'll tell you what you want to know. I don't. It doesn't bother me. I just don't want to be TMI for your audience. We had an unusual circumstance. And he had some things in his background that impacted the way he was, and I think that kept him from doing what he needed to do and making the choices that would have saved our marriage. But I don't know. Have you ever watched the show or heard of the show Sex in the City?
I have, yes.
Did you ever watch it?
I did a while ago. I mean, I don't know the whole. I don't have a lot of it to memory, but I did watch it.
Okay. For anyone who knows or remembers Charlotte York, and the character and her first marriage to Trey McDougal, yeah, that's exactly what happened to mine.
Got it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean by TMI. If I need to paint a more clearer picture, I can. So I ended up 3 years in, decided this wasn't working after a lot of attempts at counseling and other various things, and I was done. So we split up, and then my point of view on it would be, first of all, you have to kind of relook and evaluate your life when you think it's headed in one direction and then it's not. Whether you wanted it to or not, even though I chose to leave it, I didn't choose the situation that created the necessity of leaving it. From my perspective, for anyone who may be of a faith background, again, it was a scriptural divorce. So even though I felt within my rights of scripture of what it would allow for, it still put me in a position that I didn't expect to be in or thought my life was going to go. I mean, I was raised in the faith, and we don't, in my family, we didn't believe in divorce, but yet I'm divorced. So, it wasn't something we did in our family. And because of that, it took me probably about 6 months to really decide if I was really going to divorce him or not. That was a struggle for me. But once I got there and knew that that was the right decision, I wanted to, okay, so I'm going in a different direction. What does this look like? What do I want to create for myself and my new part of my journey? And as far as the prospects of whether I would look for love again or try and think of someone, finding another person, I was young. I was 26. I mean, I guess I'm still young. I'm 43, but at the time, that was 16 years ago, I think, in 05. If I did my math right, I'm not the best math person in the world. That's why I stick with liberal arts. But I just didn't think that was acceptable, that crappy of a first situation would be my only shot at love and romance. I thought, no, that's not acceptable. So if it was meant to be, then the Lord would bring me somebody else, and he did. Luckily, in 05, not long after I'd been divorced, which sounds weird, but I hadn't been with him, my first husband, in almost a year. So I was okay with that. I was legally divorced and did all the things, counseling in a program called Divorce Care and all that jazz, and felt like I was ready. So I pursued it, what the opportunity that came my way. And then fortunately, he ended up being the next chapter. And so we met and dated for 2 years and got married in 07, and was the love of my life. And we had an amazing journey of almost 12 years dating and marriage. And then in 2017, that led to the third D of, we lost him. He passed away, and I was 38 and had 2 young kids. I mean, they're still young, but they were younger then. And then I moved back to Louisiana, and here we are.
Yeah. So, wow, that's a lot. Can you just share? So from getting divorced and healing and, finding that love again, which is beautiful because sometimes divorce scars people so bad to where they're just like, I am never going to ever, they're just like done with marriage. But I always think it's so beautiful when people have been hurt and they decide that they're going to love again. So can you just share what was your experience like when you did decide to do that and you fell in love, got married, and then unfortunately he passed? Did that, what did that do to your faith? And what did it make you like? Were you clear about your faith? Were you like, God is still good? Or was it something that was kind of made it rocky?
It never made it rocky in the sense that I never doubted my salvation or I left. We've been arguing off and on for 4 years. Let me put it that way. We've been having discussions. It's made it more challenging, and it's made me, I don't want to say question him or who he is or what he does for us or where I stand, but more of aspects of, it's kind of like until you've been through something that you don't really think, it in your head, but you don't really think about it or really understand what it means until you've traveled it. So it kind of brought some of it closer to home and made me figure out, like, how does this work and what does this really mean? And, so it's made it challenging. Does that make any sense?
No, that does. So, what does the healing process look like for you? What is healing looking like? What is moving forward, raising your children? What is that looking like now? If you are just now tuning in to this episode of Unmute Your Mic, my name is Jessica Bell. I am your host, and currently I'm talking to Michaela Cox. She's from Louisiana, and we are talking about the 3 D's in her life: death, divorce, and disability. It is definitely a conversation you don't want to miss, so keep on tuning in.
Well, I mean, like I said, it'll be actually next Sunday, it'll be 4 years exactly. So we're a week out for me at the 4-year mark. It's been challenging. It's been difficult. It's oddly enough, I never thought I'd be in a position to compare them, and I'm not taking your experience away from you or anyone else in the audience who's been divorced, but actually, death of a spouse is a lot harder than divorce, believe it or not. I thought divorce was a pain in the butt, but no, divorce ain't got nothing on this, in my humble opinion. Each to their own. I can only speak for me, but it's been challenging. It's not only for me, but I also, whereas I was divorced, I didn't have kids, but now I have 2 children, so it makes a whole nother dynamic to the equation. And they were young when he died. My daughter was 6 and my son was 3, so they were crazy young. Not the youngest I've ever heard of, but still very young in life to have such a hard hit. And I was young too, but not the youngest I've ever heard of, but young enough. Yeah, it's just been a lot, the first year. The thing about grief is it's very much a process and a journey, and it's very evolving. So as soon as you think okay, that's over. No, it's never over, and it's just changing like the seasons. So there's a lot of components to it. There's a lot of aspects to it, and it's not linear like we're like to think in our culture. It's very flowing, like like water through a pond or a creek and a ripple. You can throw a rock into it and change the flow, and it, be more rock, more a soft flow or a more rush depending on the day and depending on what's going on. There's some days you're not, closer to the not so okay end of the spectrum, and then you have days where, especially the further you're into it, for each individual person, you have days that, okay, this might be okay, closer into the spectrum, and then you have some that are a little of both and more messy. So.
No, I love that analogy because I think that is so real. And anyone who has experienced any type of grief knows that it's not just like, oh, it's been 2 years, so I'm good. Or, oh, it's been X amount of time, so I'm okay. It is a constant process of healing, of working through, of really having to, test your faith and have conversations with God. So I really like that you use that analogy. And so I just think it's so interesting because you have gone through a lot of life, and you're not like 100 years old, right? So like
No, I'm not. It feels like it sometimes, but I'm not.
You still have a lot of life left, and so I want
for kid's sake.
to. So I want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned when you introduce yourself that you are an author. So can you talk a little bit about some of the books that you have written and what led you down that path?
Well, I've always written. I don't remember not ever writing. I can't not write. And when I'm not writing, I'm thinking about it, whether I want to or not. That's just the way my brain works. It just flows. I mean, it's who I am. It's what I do. It's what I love. It's what I've always done. I was a little bit of a weird kid. I remember in 2nd grade, it occurred to me that I had a voice and I had something to say, and I was ticked off about, it was even on politics. I mean, who in the crap in 2nd grade writes on politics, for crying out loud? Go figure, whatever. I guess it was destined. I was supposed to have a master's in political science and American government. No, I cannot just do one thing. I wrote an editorial on, I don't remember how it became an issue in that time period when I was 8. That would have put me 85, 86, somewhere in there. And I wrote it on, it was wrong to burn the American flag. So I don't know if it was a Supreme Court decision or a controversy of an event, but it struck a chord with me, and I wrote that. And then in 4th grade, I decided to write my first poem. Now, obviously, what I write now is very different than what I wrote when I was a kid, but I've always written. When I got into high school, I had most of my education before college was private education, except for 3 years. I had an English teacher that kind of really opened up to my eyes to what I could do with my writing. And so I was kind of taking this thing of poetry and spirituality. Now, when I say poetry, I do free verse. I don't do I don't do rhyme and meter and no. I'm not that good. I don't do that. I'm lucky if it rhymes, okay? So I'm very free verse. It's whatever comes out. But so I had this thing that I felt like I wanted to not pay tribute, but show gratitude for the people that were important to me. So I took their favorite verses, and not that I'm not saying I know what God says everything in His Word, or that I'm speaking for God. I'm not arrogant like that, but I would read that scripture and kind of interpret and write down what I thought it meant and give it to that person. So it was a collection that I started in like 8th or 9th grade that came out in 2011, but I finished it in 2004 because when I'm in school, I pick at things because I don't have as much time because of my vision. It takes me so long to do school, even though I'm good at it. So I don't leave a lot of extra time for things. So it finally came out in 2011. It was called Heartfelt Meditations, a collection of poetry inspired by Cherished Scripture. So that's on Amazon too. Now, fast forward through a lot of stuff in 2011. I was living in New Hampshire with my husband, the one that passed away. And I had just had a child. She was 8 months old. I had the brilliant idea, oh, you're a new mom. Let's start grad school. Yeah, I'm not so sure that was the smartest way of doing that. But hey, whatever. I did it. I got through it. I lived to tell, okay? And not only did I live to tell that, I ended up having another kid in grad school and wrote a thesis, legally blind, with a 3-year-old, a 4-month-old who was not sleeping through the night and didn't have readers. So yeah, that about killed me right there. Never again. You will never hear me talk about another thesis. Thank God. I'm done.
So
Nope.
can I ask you, with all the things that you've gone through and that you've been able to write books, the things that you've dealt with, what is it that made you not quit and just say, this is too much? I don't want to do this. Like, I'm just throwing in the towel on life. What has kept you going?
My faith, obviously, first and foremost, and my beliefs. I was raised with the ideas and the beliefs that let's see what she can do and try her best and just keep going. You don't quit, you don't stop, and you do what you can. You don't give up. And the doctors told my parents, because you have to think I was born in 78. So, I mean, not saying we know all medical advancements now in all areas, but it was, 78, they were in the dark ages compared to now. Okay. They didn't know anything, especially about my situation. Because, I've known other disabled people and visually impaired people, but you could pick 100 people who are visually impaired and they're all going to have a different type of visual impairment that's created by totally different things. And even if they were the exact same, if it affects them by the slightest degree differently, the way it impacts their life is totally different, even though it could be the same situation. That's probably one of the most interesting aspects when you're dealing with visual impairment, because it can be the same thing but be totally different animal. It's really weird. But so I just never, my parents always felt like, well, the doctors are saying this, but we've never done this before, so let's see what she can do and let her do it and try it. And so I did. And so I kind of developed this thing of, you tell me no, I'm going to prove your ass wrong. Sit back and hold my beer and watch.
I love that. And I always love asking that
no.
question.
I'm a redhead for one thing. And I don't know if y'all can tell, I'm a Southern Texas girl and I'm actually a Scorpio. So yeah, that's an interesting combination right there in its own right. So I live up to the reputation of all of those things. I promise you that. For better or for worse. Some days it might be for worse, depending on who you are. But hey, whatever. I keep it interesting, right? So yeah, that's pretty much what I've done my whole life. It was, I'm gonna prove your ass wrong. Sit back and watch. And it wasn't an option for me. It is an option because I could have chose differently, but I've just always chosen that approach.
And I love that because I love asking that question, because so many people who are the people who just like overcome things and they just keep doing it, and they're just like, the answer is so simple. They're just like, I don't quit. But I noticed that when people have a lot of things that they've had to overcome in their life, each thing that you overcome is almost like another like medal of like, if I overcame this, what would stop me from overcoming this next obstacle? Because
Right.
anything that you've gone through in your life could have automatically been looked like something that could have taken you out. Like, oh, you could have been
Oh yeah.
completely blind, and then then you went through a divorce, and then you went through death, and these are all things that individually some people can't walk through, and you
Exactly.
have the ability to walk through all three, as well as raising children and writing books. And so you've had a life of just overcoming, but also of being a blessing to other people as well. And I think that
I
is
have my moments.
but even if we don't always feel like we're personally blessing people, our story blesses people, because if people are able to sit back and listen and hear you talk about the things you've gone through, and so in a manner in which you're talking about it from a place of strength, you're talking about it from a place of like, yes, that sucked, but I'm here now, and I'm, like you said, and just sit back and watch me continue to live my life and continue to write
Right.
your story. And I love that. I love that your story has really just started, because you've had a lot of chapters, but you have a lot more to go. And so I always end my podcast with just asking you to please share some inspiration to the people who are listening. If there's somebody listening who has gone through all three, or maybe just one, or just struggling in life, they just find themselves hitting obstacles, can you share a little bit of inspiration about how they should continue to keep going?
Yeah, I've been talking about 4 things a lot lately. That I think is what has allowed me to do what I've done in any and all of them. And I think these things that I'm fixing to mention are universal in the sense that it's not just because of my circumstances or particular, this, trials and tribulations, but it's what would be applicable to anybody in any type of excuse me, trial or tribulation or suffering. It works for all of them. First of all, life is a choice. Now, we may not get to choose the circumstances we're given. Okay, I didn't choose the disability. I mean, I didn't even know what the heck was going on. And, whatever, I was a baby. I mean, what the crap? But, and yes, I did walk away from my first marriage, but I did not choose the circumstances of which created the need to walk away. That was on him. That was his choices, and he didn't do what was supposed to save our marriage. And that's another story, another time. But I didn't choose that any more than me or my children chose to lose their father, my husband, almost 4 years ago. But what I do get to choose is what I do with them. And I do get to choose to not be defined by them, but to define myself for myself and the life that I live. You have to think of it like you're a poker player or a card player and you're given cards, right? Well, you don't choose those cards necessarily, or you know which ones you're going to get till you look at your hand. But you hopefully get to choose, if you're a good enough poker player and skilled at cards, to choose strategically when you play a card for the end game of doing well in that hand. Or if you're an artisan, you get hired for a job and you may not get the materials that are your favorite materials that you prefer to work with, but you still have the ability and choice and power to make whatever beautiful creation you want on that canvas. They can't control that. You do. So it's still a choice, and it's still our responsibility and within our power to choose what we want in life and design our own life, and to define it for ourselves and not be defined by what we're coming up against, such as all the D's we've been talking about: disability, divorce, death of my husband. The second thing, to me, it's a mindset. I think there's a reason why in our society we have that expression, mind over matter. Now, I think this is one of the more challenging areas of most people's lives, but I do think it's key. I think our mindset, which again we can choose to a point, can totally impact whether it puts us being closer to the not so okay of the spectrum of things, or more towards the end of the spectrum of, okay, we can do this. This will be okay. Maybe not today, but this will be okay. Now, I'm not saying these mindsets and these choices are easy. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying I have all the answers. I'm not saying I have it all figured out. I have more figured out than I did, but I'm still figuring stuff out because it is an evolving process. What I am saying is I do have experience that have taught me things and given me truth and wisdom that I can share with people, and a story that I feel like I'm supposed to share. And so making a choice, not letting it be defined, but defining it for ourselves, our mindset. And what I mean by that is, yes, we have thoughts and feelings that come into our head, and we have to process them and we have to deal with them. But once we do that, we can choose to stay with the crappy ones, or are we going to try and, despite how bad it may be, let's try and find happy or joy or think positive or whatever, or the world is still half full, or, let's be an optimist as much as we can. Some days is that easier? Absolutely. Some days that doesn't feel possible? Absolutely. But you still get to choose where you go with that. And that mindset can help you stay with the choices that you want to choose to get you going where you want to be in life. That's two of them. This one I think is equally important. And this one, I will admit, was harder for me as a young mom in grad school because I didn't have a lot of time at all. And I think this is also challenging for most women. I can't speak for guys, but for women, I think this is very much a challenge. Self-care. Taking the time out from your crazy life and saying, you know what? I need a break. I need to, whatever that thing is for you that allows you to feel like you are giving yourself some few moments of caring for yourself and your needs, whatever that may be. Now, that can look like different things for different people because we're all different, individual, unique with what works for us and our likes and our dislikes and our interests and our hobbies or where we're at in life. When I was a young mom with a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old and a 4-month-old, what I needed for self-care was totally different from what I need today. I was happy if I got to pee in peace or eat a meal without interruption, okay? Or got a 10-minute nap or got a bath without someone knocking on the door saying, Mommy, no. You leave that door alone, and if you open that door, you're opening at the risk of my life because Mama wants a bath and peace. Okay, but my kids are older now, so they're 7 and 10, so I don't need as much as that now. What I need is a night out with my girlfriends, so I pay a babysitter. That's my self-care. Or other aspects, because I have the freedom now, because they're school age, provided we don't go backwards with COVID and they stay in school. I have my Mondays 8 to 3, Monday through Friday, to do what I need to do. So my self-care needs look very different than when they were younger. And as they're out of the house eventually, that'll look different then too. I think they're okay. I was like hearing noises. And I like doing journaling. I like meditation. I love prayer. I like music. I like time with my girlfriends, but you may have a different jam. Like people may want to go on a hike and be in nature, and that's their self-care. It doesn't matter what it is. The point is that you're taking whatever that looks like for you and attending to your needs, because we're a well. Think of it as that we're a well, a deep well. And if we're always giving out water happily to people because we love the people we love and want to take care of them, but eventually if we don't put something back in, we're going to be out of water and our well's going to dry up, and then we're going to be useless for everybody and not be able to do those things that we want to do and need to do. So while
that's great. Yeah.
It's really not, because we're doing ourselves a favor and the people in our lives, because we're making sure that we're still able to do what we need to do and want to do. Now, you have to do it in balance. You can't leave the kids at the house 8 hours by themselves and just say, they'll be fine, and go do what you want. That's not what I'm saying. You have to do it in balance with what works for your life, whatever that is. And that can be a wide range, as long as you're giving care to yourself and your needs and allowing yourself to find balance, centered, focused. So that you
Michaela,
can
I thank you so much, because you have given some great tips and great advice. And I think it's things that we can all apply very often, not even if it's every day, but like you said, it's so important for us to remember the self-care, like taking care of ourselves, because how can we pour out to others when we don't have anything to pull from, if we're not pouring back into ourselves. So I just want to thank you again for deciding to be on my podcast. I want to let everybody know, please stay connected to Michaela. I'm going to put all of her information down below. Purchase her books, reach out to her. As you see, she has a great personality and is fun to talk to. So I just want to, and I would love to have you back on to hear more about your
awesome.
story. Get more, because we could have kept talking forever.
Easily.
So I want to thank you again, Michaela. I want to thank everybody for listening to another episode of Unmute Your Mic. As always, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Michaela, God bless you. I look forward to staying connected with you.
Definitely. Let's do it. And thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
Of course. And everyone, continue to be bold, be heard, and unmute your mic. You have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Unmute Your Mic. Be sure to tune in next time when Jessica takes her mic off mute as she continues her journey to find stories that inspire and uplift our communities.